My boss used our nonprofit to launder $30 million. I was fired for trying to stop him, but the IRS Whistleblower Program paid me $5 million to shut it down. I spent 10 years of my life working for the charity Bright Future. When I walked into that office every morning, I genuinely believed we were changing the world. I was the CFO, signing off on our federal tax documents, the Form 990s. My faith in our mission, building schools in developing countries, was absolute. Then there was Robert Thorne, the CEO. He was the face of the organization. Charismatic, constantly shaking hands with politicians and major donors. He was the reason we looked legitimate. My descent began in late 2021. Thorne started making purchases that were incompatible with the charity leader's modest salary. A new Gulfstream jet was leased under a cryptic entity. A $7 million yacht suddenly appeared in his name in the Bahamas. When I questioned these massive outflows, Thorne's executive assistant merely rerouted the invoices back to me, categorizing them vaguely as global program development or consulting fees. I knew where the body was buried. I found this central flaw in our operation, a shell company called Global Consulting. I pulled the corporate filings and confirmed Thorne was the sole owner. Here was the scheme. Bright Future needed to host major fundraising galas. Thorne forced us to hire Global Consulting for event management. A legitimate service costing $50,000 was billed to the charity at $500,000. That $450,000 difference was quietly transferred from the nonprofit's tax-exempt accounts, money intended for textbooks and bricks, straight into Thorne's private consulting firm, tax-free. I tracked the pattern. Over 36 months, I calculated the theft. It wasn't $5 million. It was over $30 million siphoned out of the charity's treasury. This was beyond simple embezzlement. This was high-level money laundering, using a tax-exempt status as a shield. I confronted him in his office with a meticulously organized binder of bank statements. I didn't yell. I just placed the binder on his massive oak desk. Robert, I can't sign the next 990. This is systematic fraud. You need to report this immediately. Thorne didn't even open the binder. He leaned back, his smile predatory. You think you're the first CFO who thought they were smarter than the system, OP. The board is loyal to me. The donors love me. You are a line item. You like your six-figure salary? Then you sign the paperwork or you become a legal liability. The next morning, security escorted me out. I was instantly fired for gross insubordination and breach of a non-disclosure agreement. I wasn't just unemployed. I was facing the terrifying reality that I had signed 2 years of fraudulent federal tax returns. If Thorne went down, the IRS could drag me down too. The fight was no longer about revenge. It was about preventing a felony conviction. The terrifying choice I faced was this. If I cooperated with Thorne, I risked prison time for signing fraudulent federal tax forms. If I reported him, I risked being blacklisted forever. How do you fight a massive fraudster when you're technically complicit in his crime, and the only path to safety means exposing yourself to the very same government agency? I was panicked. Thorne's legal team immediately sent a cease and desist letter threatening a $10 million lawsuit for violating my non-disclosure agreement. I was facing financial ruin before the real fight even started. I couldn't just sue for wrongful termination. That was small change. I needed leverage that terrified Robert Thorne and the government itself. My corporate lawyer, Sarah, was the one who saw the bigger game. She said, "You don't fight him, OP. You make the government fight him for you. We're filing under IRS Section 7623B. She explained the rule, and it felt like a lifeline. If my information led the IRS to collect more than $2 million in unpaid taxes, I was legally entitled to a reward between 15% and 30% of the total collection. If the IRS recovered that full $30 million plus penalties, I could walk away with nearly $9 million, tax-free. It was the ultimate incentive turning my own desperation into a weapon. But the process was grueling. Filing a whistleblower claim isn't like sending an anonymous tip. The IRS demands detailed, credible, original information. Sarah needed me to prove two things simultaneously: Thorne's systematic fraud and my own unwilling participation. We spent weeks in her office building the Form 211 submission. I meticulously recreated the flow of funds using memory and the few documents I had managed to save before being escorted out. We organized the spreadsheets, cross-referencing market rates for event services with the obscene invoices from Thorne's shell company, Global Consulting. The toughest part was addressing my own liability. I had signed the Form 990s. Sarah drafted a detailed affidavit where I explained how Thorne had coerced me, how I had objected in writing, and how my termination was directly tied to my refusal to continue the fraud. This affidavit was critical. It turned me from a potential defendant into a cooperating witness. The fear was constant. We knew Thorne's lawyers were searching for any evidence of my guilt or any failure in my disclosure. I was paranoid about being followed, paranoid about every email. For 6 months, I was essentially living a ghost life, waiting for the federal giant to move. Then, the breakthrough. Exactly 14 months after filing, Sarah called. The tone in her voice was different. She had received a confidential communication from the IRS Chief Counsel's office. They confirmed the information was highly credible. They weren't just moving forward. They had initiated a massive, complex audit of Bright Future. And they had cross-referred the file to the Department of Justice Criminal Division for suspected money laundering charges. The stakes had just been raised infinitely higher. The IRS was hunting the unpaid taxes, but the DOJ was hunting Thorne's freedom. My initial simple whistleblower complaint was now the foundation for a federal criminal case against a powerful CEO. The immediate consequence was terrifying. Thorne's lawyers officially filed their $10 million NDA lawsuit against me. How do you defend yourself in a civil suit filed by a ruthless multi-million-dollar corporation when the only reason you have any defense is because the U.S. government might win a criminal case 2 years down the road? The moment the Department of Justice officially joined the investigation, the tenor of the fight changed from civil audit to criminal siege. Thorne's lawyers intensified their harassment, filing motions to compel me to hand over every personal document I owned, trying to find anything that would make me look unstable or greedy. They tried to depose me for the NDA lawsuit, a tactic designed purely to intimidate. They wanted me to crack before I could testify. But the IRS was relentless. They forced Thorne and his accomplices to appear for intense, closed-door depositions. Thorne played the victim, claiming he was merely delegating and that I, the CFO, was the true mastermind behind any accounting errors. He was desperate to shift the criminal liability onto me. The real confrontation came during the discovery phase in tax court. The IRS attorneys systematically tore apart the financial structure of Bright Future. They demonstrated the organization's entire purpose had been corrupted, operating primarily for the private benefit of Robert Thorne. Thorne's defense relied entirely on one witness, his hand-picked CPA, who was supposed to testify that the global consulting fees were reasonable and the expenses were categorized in good faith. I sat in the observation room, rigid with anxiety. This was the moment of truth. If they validated his accounting, the whole criminal case against Thorne could weaken. The DOJ attorney, a young but vicious prosecutor named Anya, didn't even bother cross-examining the CPA on the accounting principles. She moved straight to the hidden motive. She placed 2 documents side by side on the screen. One was a $450,000 invoice from Global Consulting for the annual donor gala. The other was a grainy photo I had saved from Thorne's personal iCloud showing the exact same gala setup, but with a handwritten note scribbled on the corner of the tablecloth titled Cost Estimate, $48,000. The handwriting was Thorne's. Anya asked the CPA, "Sir, looking at this private handwritten note detailing the true cost, would you still categorize a $450,000 transfer as reasonable and made in good faith?" The CPA went silent for a full 30 seconds. He knew the federal perjury rules. Finally, he whispered, "No, not in light of this document. It appears to show deliberate concealment." It was a total legal knockout. The psychological pressure was now unbearable on Thorne. Then Anya presented my affidavit detailing how Thorne threatened me to sign the fraudulent 990s. The board members, who were also complicit, suddenly realized they were next. One by one, they began contacting the DOJ's immunity hotlines. Thorne's ring of protection had been completely dissolved by a single internal memo and the fear of prison. Thorne's lead criminal defense lawyer approached the DOJ team with a desperate request for a plea deal. They didn't want the case to go to a criminal jury. The evidence of willful intent to defraud was now undeniable. The plea deal offered to Thorne included a non-negotiable term: my full testimony in the criminal court proceeding. This meant I had to face Thorne's team not in a civil court, but under oath, knowing my words could send him away for years. Would you risk exposing yourself to cross-examination by a ruthless criminal defense lawyer who would attempt to destroy your credibility and reputation in front of a jury, even if it guaranteed the downfall of the man who ruined your life? I accepted the plea deal term. Testifying against Thorne in a criminal proceeding was the only way to guarantee his downfall and secure my immunity. The risk was enormous. But after 3 years of living in fear, I was ready to face him one last time. The case never went to a full jury trial. Facing the undeniable evidence of my handwritten notes and the defection of his own board members, Robert Thorne knew he was finished. He accepted a global settlement and plea agreement with the DOJ and the IRS. First, the criminal punishment. Thorne pleaded guilty to multiple counts of tax fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 5 years in a low-security federal prison. The charity, Bright Future, was forced to dissolve, and its remaining legitimate assets were transferred to another, clean nonprofit. Second, the financial restitution. The IRS recovered over $30 million in unpaid taxes and penalties from Thorne, Global Consulting, and his seized personal accounts. Every penny he stole was taken back. His private jet was sold. His yacht was auctioned off. The corporate thief who preached charity was left with nothing but a prison number. For me, the immediate threat of the $10 million NDA lawsuit vanished. The civil court immediately dismissed Thorne's complaint against me, citing the public interest and the fact that the federal government deemed my disclosure necessary to stop a crime. My reputation, though scarred, was legally cleared. Then came the waiting game for the final payoff. The IRS Whistleblower Program is bureaucratic. It takes time to process the collection and finalize the reward. I spent another agonizing year checking my mailbox every day. Finally, a thick, official-looking envelope arrived from the Department of Treasury. Inside was the final determination letter. Because my information was judged original, credible, and directly responsible for recovering the full $30 million penalty, the IRS awarded me the maximum percentage under the law, 16.7% of the recovered funds. My reward was a tax-free cashier's check for $5,010,000. I sat there, holding the check, the culmination of 3 years of hell. It paid for my lawyer, restored my life, and secured my future. I proved my innocence, exposed a massive corporate fraudster, and received a bounty that was greater than the salary I had earned in 10 years. The U.S. government paid me millions of dollars to do the right thing. I lost my high-paying job, I lived in fear of federal prosecution, but I won my freedom, my reputation, and my fortune back. Robert Thorne's greed cost him his freedom, his fortune, and his legacy. I didn't blow the whistle to get rich. I did it because he backed me into a corner and tried to use me as a shield for his crime. But I won't deny the profound satisfaction of using the federal legal system to turn a criminal's malice into my personal retirement fund. Robert Thorne exploited public trust to launder $30 million. I destroyed his life, but became a hero and a millionaire. The question is, knowing the immense stress and danger of being blacklisted, would the chance of a $5 million tax-free reward be enough motivation for you to risk everything and expose a powerful figure in your own company? Tell me your verdict in the comments.